Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Poets and Quants' MBA Student Perspective Panel. Today, we're joined by current students from IESE and London Business School. I'm your host, Christy Bleisefer of Poets and Quants, and please feel free to use the Q&A function to submit any questions you have for our panelists. I'll do my best to get to those at the end of the session. Well, let's begin by getting to know our two panelists. If you'd each introduce yourself, your MBA program, and a fun fact about yourself. And Hugh, let's start with you.
All right, so my name is Hugh Phelan. I'm from Philadelphia. Went to undergrad at Notre Dame in the States and studied political science before joining a venture capital firm after graduation back in Philadelphia. So I spent about 4 years there. After 4 years, I jumped to the portfolio side. I joined one of the startups as a product manager for 3 years. And then joined IESE in 2023. So I'll be graduating this year as part of the class of 2025. My fun fact is I play the piano and I joined a cover band at IESE. And we just last weekend played in front of 1,000 people at IESE's annual multi-culti event, which is like a party where students representing 60 countries basically share their food, their drinks, and dances from their respective cultures.
Amazing. What kind of music did you play?
ABBA and Queen,
Oh,
stuff that people know internationally. So
oh, what a
that
fun
basically is
party.
ABBA, Queen, Coldplay, Maroon 5, and Journey. So
Oh, man, that sounds great. Blue, how about you?
Hi everyone, my name is Blue Bookhard. I originally am from the United States. My undergrad, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, was a communications major. And for the past 5 years, I've spent working in the tech space, specifically within the function of marketing. And I'm currently a student, an MBA student at London Business School, living in London. I joined the program in 2023, and I will be graduating in 2025.
Yeah, and
And
congratulations on that. That's a lot of work. So, well, Blue, let's stick with you. Tell us a little bit more about your, MBA journey, what your thought process on, deciding you wanted to get an MBA, the application process, that kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, the moment that I realized I wanted to pursue an MBA was after my last performance review. I realized I was hitting this point in my career where, in order for me to really level up and pursue senior management or director level roles, I needed a different skill set. I needed maybe some more experience working with quant projects like basic Excel, for example, as a communications undergrad. I didn't have that context. I was being asked to forecast now. And then I was being asked to interface with international stakeholders and really lead initiatives on behalf of my department. And I realized that my base level of skills that I had for my bachelor's degree just wasn't enough. I also didn't even have the confidence in order to achieve these things. And I wanted some global experience too. So as an American, there was a lot of global, or local, I should say, MBA programs, but I realized that I needed to get a global experience. I needed to leave the States. And then I also needed to really double down on courses like finance, accounting, and then take advantage of like the leadership opportunities that I could have as well too. So the YMBA was kind of that. And then it was, okay, I want to do an MBA, and then internationally, and then LBS really checked off all those boxes for me.
Yeah, what was that application process like? Any tips or tricks for that?
Oh boy, that's a long slog. I think you realize you want to do the MBA, and then you like get in 2 years after that, and then you graduate 2 years after that. So
Yeah.
it's funny, the seeing New Year's and seeing 2025, it felt like that year would never come. Here we are in 2025. I mean, for me, I first started with the GMAT and GRE. I knew that in order to even apply to these schools, of course, I already had a bachelor's degree. I had the work experience, I had the years, but I needed to get the test score to be eligible to apply. So I started researching which test would actually work well for me. I started my sort of prep, and then I started working with a GRE and a GMAT coach. Did some practice tests, and basically came to realize which test I'd take. And then it was a bit of a sort of matchmaking endeavor, you could say, to research the universities, talk to some of the alumni, attend some of their open events. A lot of them had panels or even past podcasts with students to see sort of which school aligned with my personal aspiration and also professional. And then I would say the application process took about a year and a half. That's beginning my essays, speaking to my manager at the time about my interest in it, asking them to write a letter of recommendation, again, researching the schools, engaging with the schools, applying, getting in, and then ultimately going.
Yeah, absolutely. Hugh, tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so like I'd mentioned, I had these 7 years between graduation and going into this program, and those 7 years were kind of a blurry sprint. I worked super hard in venture capital, and then super hard at a restaurant software company, and you can imagine when COVID hit, all hell broke loose, and so super hard became super hard. Uh, and it was a great time, and I learned a ton, but it was chaos, and it was confined to this world of East Coast business software startups. And so like after 7 years, I just felt like I was barreling down this relatively narrow career and life path that I didn't really feel like I was consciously or actively choosing anymore. Um, so the MBA in general just seemed like an opportunity to click pause, um, to kind of expand my world a bit and reassess what I wanted to do, and then be strategic about pursuing whatever that was. Um, it also helped that everyone I spoke to that had done an MBA, they were having a lot of fun in their programs. So that was a non-insignificant factor.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of, I guess I could talk
Any
about
trick,
the
any
application
like,
or
kind of advice about the application process?
yeah, so my approach is was a bit different than Blue's, so might be helpful. I basically once I decided I was going to do an MBA, I left my job. I studied full time for the GRE, which was better for me because I'm not very good with numbers. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but GRE kind of helps more with my political science background
Yeah.
than the GMAT. Um, so, I did that. That probably took 2 months of just full time studying every day. I took it a few times till I got the scores I needed, and then wrote all the applications. So in total for me, it took 3 months of full time. And then I spent the year leading up to the actual MBA doing independent consulting projects with a bunch of different startups and a couple VC firms, just to kind of start that whole exploration journey before I got to the program.
Yeah. So Hugh, tell us a little bit more about your program. Was it like your first choice? Was it or did you look at other schools? And what was kind of the deciding factors in your choice?
Yeah, so I had no idea what the first choice was at first.
Hmm.
I basically just applied to the top 5 schools in the States that seemed to have more of a tech component to it or an entrepreneurship component.
Hmm.
Um, and then I applied to the top 3 2-year programs in Europe. And the idea there was, if it's, the long-term value of the MBA, in my opinion, is the network, and the best network is at the top schools. And I also think that, if the value is the network, then you should probably spend a couple years, not just 10 months, um, building those relationships, lasting
Yeah.
relationships. Uh, so in terms of like how the choices shook out, I probably, in all honesty, would have gone to Stanford if I had gotten in, but I bombed the interview. So I think that that was my first choice, but in retrospect, it might have been the wrong choice. And I'll explain why here. Um, so like I looked at IESE, and every school has fits different folks, but for me it had a really compelling combination of factors where it's a far more international experience, and I think you get that at LBS as well. We've 60 different countries represented in our class. There's the biggest group is Spanish people, which makes sense, but they're only 13% of the class. So folks from all around the world, you're in a city with great weather, great food, great
Yeah.
architecture, history, culture, and it's really cheap.
Yeah.
So like if I had actually gotten into Stanford, I would be I'd be poor living in a shoebox in Palo Alto, and the living here is quite good, and the experience seems a bit broader than I would have gotten if I had stayed in the States.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective about you may not get into your first, but it is a journey, and sometimes the first isn't going to be the right. Blue, tell us a little bit about the key factors for LBS.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely will echo Hugh's points about the international aspect of my MBA program. I knew that I wanted to leave the United States in order to pursue my MBA. I was really open with the idea of either returning back to the States or spending even more time in the UK or Europe afterwards. So my thought was I might as well start in Europe now, and at minimum, I'll do 2 years here. And for me, yeah, like I think LBS clocks in right now at over 85% of students who are international. That means like 85% of students need a visa in order to go to the school. I think we are like 8% or so folks that are actually English, but that doesn't, take into account dual citizenship, for example. So the school just on paper is an incredibly diverse learning environment. And I knew that that was going to be critical for me. London itself also is an incredibly international city, even more so than New York, which is where I'm from. So that was another sort of an add plus for why LBS. I knew I wanted to be at a 2-year program because I wanted to take advantage of an internship opportunity. So I knew a lot of companies that do recruiting for after the MBA will almost require a student to intern and then give them a converting offer. I also was hoping to change sectors as well. So I needed to dabble a little bit in that industry before I went and made the jump. I thought I was gambling too much just taking an opportunity in a new industry that I hadn't tried out before. And then the last two reasons of why I chose LBS, at least, one was I noticed there was a lot of student engagement. This was students who were involved as alumni and decided they wanted to lead alumni chapters. The student club scene at LBS is actually pretty large. I'm on the student
Right.
association, so we'll talk more about that later. And then the last one was experiential learning. There was programs like London CAP that we offered. There's opportunities that students have to go out of the classroom and actually apply the concepts that they're learning directly from faculty and use them in a real world setting before they graduate. And so I liked that. As a person who worked in marketing and wanted to stay in marketing, I knew that I couldn't just sit in a classroom and talk about it. I needed to do a little bit of it. So that was my sort of why LBS. It checked off a lot of those boxes, and I think it was unique for
Absolutely.
that reason.
Absolutely. Well, let's get in a little bit more about that learning experience, Blue. Tell us about kind of, some of the day-to-day, experience at LBS, the course load, like you said, the hands-on learning, if you're doing a lot of team projects, individual work, what's that look like?
Yeah. I mean, it varies like per student and what they're interested in pursuing while they're at LBS. But within your first year, you have a set curriculum of courses that you have to take. This is management, this is finance, marketing. And these again are pretty standard. It doesn't really deviate for every student. I think you're actually required to take all of them. So maybe
Yeah.
there's some exceptions. If you have a master's degree in economics, you can get out of one microeconomics course. But the idea is that we all have a base level of business understanding before we go into the electives. And so it's a beautiful mix. There are, of course, exams and methods of assessment that are individual. It's really hard to understand your understanding of finance or accounting if you're doing something that's not by yourself.
Right.
But I think what LBS does a good job of is they put us into groups pretty early on, and what we are able to do is talk to each other, collaborate with each other, support each other if we don't understand some assignments. And then there is a significant amount of group work that we also have to complete together within our first year. And I mean, people can love their group or they hate their group. By the time you've kind of hit the point where you're over it, the year's over. It's
Yeah.
8 months and then it's done. And then the second year is where it gets really fun. You can only do courses that are, it's like self-guided almost, and take like Finance 2, which is, going to be a lot of Excel work, for example. Or you can do like experiential classes. You can take courses that are like primarily oriented around group discussions. I did another course that was about experiential learning where we consulted a business in Kenya. So it really varies on what the skills you're trying to develop and the way in which you want your MBA to pan out. But overall, I think the first year is it's normally a really good mix where if you did the minimum, you at least will have a good understanding of how to collaborate with others and also increase your Excel chops, for example.
Yeah, and those Excel chops still important, I guess. Hugh, tell us more about your learning experience.
It's like structurally, I think it's really similar. So your entire first year is preset, and you're assigned to a team of 8 to 9 people from as many countries. And I say you do about 80 to 90% of your work with that team. I think even if you and Blue, maybe you'd agree, but like you spend so much, these people are randomly assigned, they come from everywhere, they have totally different backgrounds, different styles, and so by the end of the year you've spent so much time with them that even if you weren't naturally going to be friends, you're close because you've kind of been through it together, if that makes sense. And then, yeah, second year, very similar. It's all about electives. At IESE, you have a few different concentrations you can do if you'd like. You know, there's a finance concentration, an entrepreneurship, a data concentration. And so you can choose to where you want to spend your time. I'd also mention that like the first year's pretty rigorous. Like there's a lot of schoolwork, a lot of teamwork, a lot of learning. The second year, you definitely have more time and you can decide to dedicate that more to academics or to clubs or to social, but it becomes a lot more self-directed, which has been great.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about those extracurriculars. What's the extracurricular ecosystem at ESA, and how are you involved in that?
Sure. So I, they break it into two groups. There's the like professional clubs and then more like affinity clubs.
Yeah.
I think the professional clubs are pretty essential for entering an industry that you haven't been in before. So like the consulting club, you're running through cases really early. It's where you learn all the prep that you need to get through the interviews at the top consulting firms, which are all going to be recruiting within the first 4 months. Um, Same with the finance club. Uh, the startup. So personally, I focus more on the startup and entrepreneurship club as well as the private equity and venture capital club. And over time, I've focused more on the venture capital side since that's where I'll be going after I graduate. Uh, I think what's really cool about the club side is that as an MBA student, people pick up the phone.
Yeah.
So I get to like we organize a private equity venture capital conference every year, and it's an amazing excuse for me to call all the people who have been writing the newsletters I've been reading for years, or like, celebrities in my world anyways. And they actually like talking to students about their experiences and helping out. And that hasn't been a thing for the last 7 years for me. So it was really exciting to get back to that.
Awesome. Blue, talk about the extracurricular ecosystem at LBS.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to say that there's sort of four buckets of club types or themes at London Business School. One, you have your sports clubs, which normally are social oriented, but that's your football club, women's rugby club, racket sports, for example. Primarily, they exist as social opportunities to play and potentially compete against people who also share a common passion with that sport. But it ranges from folks that competed professionally on behalf of their country to folks that are
Wow.
trying it for the first time. We have what I consider just the passion clubs. So the board games club, wine and spirits, the art and business club, for example. They might be professional in their nature, but like you do them because you just enjoy them, and they're just ways that you would probably spend your free time outside of campus. Professional, of course, consulting, finance, marketing and strategy, entrepreneurship, uh, entrepreneurship through acquisition. These are course clubs that are really oriented towards your professional goals. It could be either like where you come from or where you want to go. For example, like the tech club has a lot of students who come from consulting who want to go into tech, and that's a great
Yeah.
way to sort of learn about the industry and potentially meet people. And then the last one I would say is we kind of classify as like identity. This is your women in business club, your black in business club, your out in business club, the Latin American club, Japan club. These are either identities that you're born into or self-identify with that would bring you together with someone else in the community. They could be professional in their nature or social. They're kind of a beautiful mixture of the two. And these really exist to like increase advocacy on behalf of these groups for the university. Again, create community, create bonds as well, educate, maybe even talk about challenges in the workspace that some of these identities might face. So I always say that like as a student at LBS, you're probably going to fit into at least 3 of those different groups. And if you join at least one, then you'll feel as if you found your home within the groups on campus. I'm also a part of the student association, specifically on sports and clubs. So I'm very passionate about bringing students together, specifically on their hobbies and the things they're doing outside of the classroom. So love
Do you want to
talking
tell
about this
us a little
topic.
bit about the clubs that you're involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. I worked in marketing, so naturally the marketing and strategy club is one that I am a part of. I'm one of the heads of careers in that club. I identify as an African-American male from the United States, so I am a part of the Black in Business Club and also the North American Club. And then a few years ago, I fell in love with football, soccer, and so I've decided that I would like to be competitive enough to play and be decent to keep up with the many Europeans and South Americans
Yeah,
that we have on the football club. So I am a very active member who is increasing his skill on a weekly
great.
basis of the football club.
Oh, that's fun. Great. Well, Blue, sticking with you, let's talk a little bit about, that connection to the alumni, or what kind of tools, platforms, does LBS offer to help connect you to that, that very extensive, impressive alumni class?
Yeah. Well, our career services team does a good job of keeping in touch with alumni who are members of target companies or alumni who are sort of in the London sphere who might want to interface with LBS. This could be that they've created a business and they want to hire an intern for the summer, or they currently work at BCG London and their company is recruiting year over year. So normally, like if we have a company come to campus, they will bring the LBS alumni who works there.
Yeah.
And that's a great way of just understanding how they got to their place from LBS. Typically, they have a program in common with you. They're an MBA, ex-MBA alum, or the MIM program or MAM, et cetera. The clubs themselves normally have a good relationship with alumni as well too. There's almost a position that's called head of alumni or alumni chair, and their job is to interface with, talk to, bring in alumni as potentially speakers to conferences or events we have on campus. And then we have our own sort of internal tool that we can use to reach out to alumni and sort of find them online. And this just allows you to manually go through alumni who share an interest with you. This could be they're from the same country as you, they worked at the company that you want to work at or also worked at in the industry you want to be in. And this allows you to really understand exactly who you should be chatting with, who's going to be able to give a piece of advice or feedback that's relevant to whatever your career goals are. And that could vary from looking for a job to exploring an industry to needing some CV reviews. CV
Yeah.
help.
Have you personally benefited from any of these connections?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my mentors, actually, we have a program called Walpole, which is a luxury leadership program that allows students to meet leaders in the luxury industry. And one of my mentors, Nick, is actually an LBS alumni. And so he's given me fantastic career advice about building my CV, really explaining what experiences I should be chatting about as I have my interviews. And he also is just like 20 years my senior, married with children, and just is able to share his insights about life. And so like we can talk about whatever the sort of challenge of the day is. He could be like, oh, my kid frustrated me today. And I'm like, let's chat about this. But he can also be like, I really know that I didn't get a promotion, And
Yeah.
so like I think he sees the value in being my mentor as much as I see the value of him mentoring me as well too.
Oh, that's great. Hugh, you had mentioned how important the network was to you. Tell me about kind of the tools and platforms that they help make those connections.
For sure. So I think a lot of folks go into IESE with an idea of going into consulting or banking, and that's typical of most MBAs. And they have a well-oiled machine for doing, bringing in alumni from these folks. Like our main offices would probably be, Madrid. We've got a decent size in Germany and a ton in the Middle East, actually, in Dubai and Riyadh. So like that's more like that's an engine, right? And it's structured, and if you can get through it, then you can land yourself a really nice job in one of these offices. Uh, what I've found is they also have relationships and job boards with, major international companies that are actively looking for MBAs and have structured programs to hire them. So
Yeah.
think like Amazon has that for their warehouses and for AWS, Kraft Heinz, just to name a couple. But so I'd say like consulting and banking is one piece. Then there's the really large conglomerates actively looking for MBAs. Personally, I've been more on the unstructured side, which is like think like tech scale ups or startups or boutique venture capital firms or private equity. Uh, and what's amazing, and I said this before, but people pick up the phone. So we have a directory that shows who went to IESE. There's also just LinkedIn, right? So you can, like, I was reaching out to the managing partner over at Early Bird, who had one of the biggest returns ever of all time. And he talked to me, right? I just reached out, cold reached out. Hey, I went to IESE. Can we chat? And he said yes. And that's happened like time and time again. And it's how I actually got my internship at a venture capital firm, Fortino, in Amsterdam. I just reached out to someone there who had gone to IESE. He picked up the phone, put my resume at the top of the pile, and so I actually got a shot instead of getting, what often happens when you apply to competitive programs is an instant rejection when
Yeah.
you're competing against 300 other people. Um, so yeah,
Ab-
that's how I've benefited so far
Yeah.
from the network here.
Do you feel like you're making some long-term relationships as well with through kind of this, alumni connections?
Absolutely. I mean, so we actually, what's really fun is you've got a class of self-starters, and folks are pretty ambitious. They're pretty naturally social. And so we actually started this uh, like angel investment group,
Yeah.
where it's not just the folks that are in the MBA who are frankly not as rich as they're going to be over time, but
Uh-huh.
we've built a community of folks in the MBA who are sourcing deals and diligencing them, like think like venture capital or search funds or small private equity, and but then also pairing with alumni that have might have gone to the school 10 or 20 years ago who have the cash but and are looking for these kind of opportunities and would love to stay engaged with the IESE network. And so we
Yeah.
just bring that like capital and competency together, and it's not just a way to invest and make money, but it's really more of a social thing. People
Yeah.
get to come back to the school, feel connected, and yeah, no, it's been it's fun that it's not just the 300 people in your class. It's the whole community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Hugh, what would you say has been kind of the biggest hallmark of your experience so far?
I'm gonna steal a Blue's comment earlier. So you might have known, Blue, going in that diversity was going to be, critical. I was more thinking about Barcelona being sunny and like cheap. But the diversity piece was the biggest surprise to me. Like it is by far like the most valuable life experience I've had coming here because, like I said before, like my life, and I'm guessing a lot of folks' lives are fairly narrow. And then you're in a community with people from all over the world, and you're learning how ignorant you are in every conversation, and you're just learning, and it's just exciting. You get to hear about other people's experiences, their perspectives, and they're coming from totally different backgrounds than yourself. And they're smart too. So like a lot of what you're hearing is valid, and I don't know, I feel like I'm coming out of this program um, just a lot more developed, I guess,
Yeah.
intellectually or just experientially. I don't know the word, but
Yeah.
the diversity piece has been the the greatest surprise and the greatest value, and that kind of goes back to what I mentioned before about, I would have gone to a US school, but it might have been a mistake,
Yeah,
because it's hard to get that in the States, I think.
absolutely. Blue, what about you? The hallmark of LBS so far?
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredibly tough question to answer. Like we have different themes of things that you enjoy about the experience. You have the social experiences, hanging out with your classmates, even. You have the academic ones too, and it could be as simple as like, I don't know, doing well on an exam. And then you have like the career-oriented ones where it could be like getting an offer, for example. Like these are all I would say like local maxima of opportunities that I would say have defined my LBS experience. If I were to boil it down to one experience that I think was like what made my LBS experience, it probably was the final pitch that my London CAP team did to the National Gallery. London CAP is an experiential learning program that we have that allows students to work with teams 2 to 5 students, and they work on like a business case for a company. And the National Gallery is one of the biggest museums in the world. It's like a staple of English culture. And my team was tasked with putting together a partnership strategy for the National Gallery for the next 2 years. So I was put together with a random group of students, and they just said, "Have at it, figure it out over 11 weeks." And so we worked really hard towards this really vague issue, problem, challenge, and built a strategy, understood each other's skill sets, tried to piece together what we would suggest and how we could integrate with the existing company strategy, with the National Gallery strategy. And then our last sort of final pitch opportunity was presenting in front of pretty much their entire advancement team, who are in charge of securing, $1 million donors. And then we looked at the news about 3 weeks later, and we saw that one of the brands that we had suggested as a partner was actually one of the partners they were going to start working with. So I like to think
Amazing.
that we influenced their partnership pitch strategy. But I think for me, that was the culmination of experiential learning, professional development, building a network, and collaborating with students, and putting what we learned in the classroom to practice as well. So again, tons of fantastic experiences. I can share more about LBS, but to me, that would be the highlight of my first year, at least, at LBS.
That's amazing. And to see it in the news, how exciting. So let's kind of end with kind of your biggest piece of advice for someone considering an MBA in general and maybe LBS in particular. Blue.
You want me? Yeah, I can start. Yeah, I think for someone considering an MBA, you really need to think through your goals and what the MBA is going to do for you. And this changes. So you might come in 1 year, and then 2 years later, the value of that, the ROI might be actually different than what you thought. 10 years later, it might be very different. But I think the students that do well at LBS and maybe even across MBAs at large are ones who have an idea of what they want to do, and they are able to articulate and even build out what the steps are required in order to get there. So it's not, I want to work in consulting. It's, I want to gain a strategic business understanding, and I want to achieve this over 5 years. Consulting can help you get there, or interning at Google can help you get there, but the role and the industry and the function is just a tactic to help you achieve your greater career goal. And so the classes you take, the people you meet, the decisions you make on a very micro basis, the events you go to, all of those should kind of stem up to a larger goal. And then if you look back on it, you'll say, okay, great. That was a successful MBA experience, because though I didn't know if I wanted to work in this industry, I still achieved this even broader career goal. So I would say that is the way to go through an MBA experience, and you'll feel fulfilled and rewarded, even if the small details change. If you don't land the internship, it's okay, because you're still bubbling up to that larger career goal that you have.
Right, absolutely. Hugh, any advice from you?
So can I start with ESA specific advertisement and then give my broader advice?
That sounds great. Go for it.
All right. So I think each program does have, an edge, and it fits different people, and you'll discover who your people are just by speaking with the alumni. But like, just in my opinion, ESA is pretty hard to beat. You've got 2 years. It's a top program. There's talented people from all over the world. I mentioned the great weather, the food, the architecture, the history, the culture, and it's all fairly affordable. And if you choose to, you could also have the opportunity to actually learn Spanish, which I've half done. I've got 2 months to get to a B level. But so that's my essay advertisement. I think in terms of advice, what I found, at least for myself, is that the most I'm getting, like, the classes are useful, the clubs are also useful, they're interesting, you learn, but it really is the social interactions that you're having that drive the value. And based on my conversations with my old boss at my first job, like half of our deal flow at this venture firm was coming from his friends from the MBA program that he'd done 30 years earlier. And so networking can be a bit of an icky word, but once you get to the MBA, you realize it's just making friends. And so I would spend as much time, it sounds a bit lightweight, but I would spend as much time on the socializing as possible. And it's not just, parties, it's one-on-one coffee chats with your classmates, with professors, with whoever's in the IESE network that, might have gone there years before, but is in an industry that you're really interested in. And one, like, you're just making friends, and these relationships are highly personally rewarding. And then I think the bet and the reason people keep going to the MBA is that in the long run, it's also professionally rewarding. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we have a couple minutes left, and I think you both said you were graduating this year, 2025. So tell me a little bit about what's next for you. Hugh, go ahead. What's next?
Sure. So I'd mentioned I got this internship through a IESE alumnus at Fortino Capital in Amsterdam. It's a early stage business software venture investor. So yeah, I interned there for 4 months, and so I will be joining on May 19th, 3 days after I graduate this year. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Great. And Blue, what about you?
Huge congratulations to you.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. So I was fortunate enough to get a return offer from my summer internship of last year. So I'm sitting on that offer. I'm moments away from clicking accept. But in the interim, I've of course entertained other opportunities and taking the full advantage of the time that we are allotted before we have to actually say yes to sign.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the beauty of the second year is you kind of at this point you have to kind of confirm some of the ideas that you had. And so for me, I definitely am trying to stay in brand management, trying to stay within the CPG or FMCG space at large. And so that could either be in the United States or in the UK or EU as of now.
That's great. Well, thank you both so much. This was like a fascinating conversation, and I think very insightful as well. And of course, thanks to all of our viewers. Be sure to watch the remaining panel sessions throughout the day to hear from other top business schools and students like Blue and Hugh from top business schools around the world. As always, be sure to go to poetsandquants.com for other informative articles, videos, and more to help no matter where you are in your MBA journey. Thank you and see you next time.